This has been the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. Buy my book, Have Name Will Travel, at Amazon and other markets. RedAnvilCreative.com contains all our podcasts. Copyright
2022.
Welcome to the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. I am TC Ricks /Rhombus Tix. So, long story short, this is the second in a 5-part series
Fight
called
the forces of evil!
The Coup. In the previous installment, I basically made the case for why I believe a coup is inevitable and why you need to prepare for one, or at least a coup attempt anyway. The next 4 sessions, including this one, will deal with specific strategies of dealing with that situation. And I'm going to start with the easiest and the one that will be the most practiced, which is how not to hide, or how to hide. Both. The reference of the title is to a Monty Python sketch called How Not to Hide, which showed several people hiding very badly. And to a certain degree, that's what we're going to do here. If you want, I'm going to follow the same structure I did with After the Coup, where I start with some reference material. There are no books on how to conceal your identity from the government or crazy people. But if you want the best guess, where I've picked up some of my ideas and understanding, I would recommend any episode of CSI, Mindhunter, or delving deep into, for example, the biography of Eric Rudolph Randi or the Unabomber. But to summarize all of those, if you are going to choose the strategy of hiding from an oppressive regime, then you need to understand what your core strategy is. And your core strategy is not to be seen. That sounds obvious, but it's not. And let me get into why. The first thing you have to understand is whether or not you're going to be a target for the regime. And the degree to which you are a target will determine the degree to which resources will be brought to bear to find or persecute and or / kill you. So I'm going to repeat a little bit of what I said in After the Coup and even during the coup to help, especially since some of it's changed, right? So I'm going to start at the top of the list with, if you are any kind of liberal celebrity, as defined by MAGA, you cannot hide, right? In other words, if you're Rachel Maddow, or you're a Democratic House representative, you are sufficiently famous that when they start putting people in camps, you are among the people who are going to immediately be put into a prison or a camp, right? The full resources of the federal government brought to bear for a prolonged period of time make the strategy of hiding effectively impossible. This strategy is not for you. If you're sufficiently famous, or I would make the argument even sufficiently tied to a famous person, right? If you are the spouse of a famous person, arguably the son or daughter or former spouse of a famous person, if you are somebody who, by dint of putting you in prison and torturing you, the regime can get points or get you to get that famous person to come back to the country so they can torture them instead, you should not hide. You should run. And I'll do that in the next podcast. If, however, you can't afford to run, then hiding is a viable option. Note, when I say hiding, I mean that it means that you're not actually in active contact with people that are going to get you caught, right? So if your excuse for not running is that you have people you need to take care of, well, okay, that's nice, but you can't take care of them from prison, right? So if you're planning on hiding, unless you're going to take everyone that you care about that could possibly be used as leverage to find you or to report you, hiding does you no good, right? Far better to come up with a plan, to come up with finding a way to get you and everybody you care about out of the country than hide it, right? The next on the target of the list, right, is going to be anybody who ever got on their radar. And what I mean by got on their radar is if you're an activist, if you've ever appeared at an Antifa rally or a Black Lives Matter rally or been a clinic escort or anybody that is on an existing list, and make no mistake, we know that they keep lists. They are maintaining lists as we speak. Now, different folks have different lists, and there's not some master list. But they are making lists. And if you think that you're on a list, there is a significant chance that the resources of the federal government will be brought to bear to find you as well. And again, there is no hiding from the federal government. Not easily. Certainly not. I think another really good media source is look at the lengths that Saul has to go to in Better Call Saul, right? If you're that level of famous and you have that level of scrutiny from the federal government, the attention will never go away, right? This podcast, this strategy, is for people who are at risk simply because of who they are, right? If you're LGBT, if you're a minority, if you are somebody who has worked in advocacy or for a representative, but you're not like somebody important enough for them to immediately put you on a red list and have you on Fox News every night for every crazy person to find you, right? Then you can potentially hide. I'm going to have a special caveat, and that is if you are LGBT, especially if you're trans, there are going to be people who can help you in ways that I can't even conceive of on this podcast. You should talk to people who lived in the closet and who lived through times that they had to hide and they knew what to say and what to do to conceal who they are in ways that I will never be able to advocate. This is the ideas I'm going to give you are more generic, right? Although one idea I can say that they might not have thought of is there is strength in numbers, right? So you might not have the ability to forge documents or to create a underground railroad, some of which I'll be talking about in the passive resistance chapter and the challenges there. But the more people who are actively involved in helping you to hide, especially if it's distributed and they don't know anything once they help you, i.e. provide the documents in question, the better off you are. On the other hand, the more people who are involved in helping you, the easier it is for them to screw up and give their little black book of people that they provided free plastic surgery to, for example, and get caught. So I think before I go farther here in terms of practical advice on how to hide, you need to understand what the regime is going to look like, right? In other podcast episodes and other places, you've seen people talk about tyrannical regimes. It's a 101 of creative media, right? A tyrannical regime is going to have the government that currently catches serial killers and terrorists instead dedicated towards rooting out anybody who they deem as insufficiently pure to the MAGA ideology. And the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, all of these things will be trailed and focused on maintaining the legitimacy and purity and power of the regime, right? Again, you want some insight on how that's going to work? Look at, read anything you want on dissidents in China and dissidents in the Soviet Union / Russia. The thumbnail of how that works is all of the technology companies, including Facebook, Twitter, Google, Apple will be leveraged to monitoring and controlling the population of the United States. And before you talk about Google and Apple and say they would never do that, understand that they will never be able to evacuate all of their people or the loved ones of all of their people out of the country. And if you put a gun at the head of somebody, no matter how their system is designed, that system will be turned against the populace. Google is already chomping at the bit with their managers to work with China. And it's only the fact that China wants nothing to do with Google, not the other way around, that is truly keeping its power from being leveraged against the populace. And if the United States of America becomes a tyrannical regime, corporations are not suddenly going to turn around and change what they do now, right? In other words, if a company doesn't do it right now, they won't do it in the future. And your cell phone and your TV and everything that you have that's connected to the internet is going to be leveraged to monitoring you 24/7 and reporting anything that the government doesn't want you to be doing to the regime. The reason I mentioned CSI, even though the plots are ridiculous and the speed at which things in CSI happen are completely fictional and completely ridiculous. But in terms of understanding what the FBI can find out if it wants to, it's very useful, right? If you leave even a hair or a fingerprint or a drop of blood or any trace of yourself at a home or a hotel room or anything else, they will be able to use that to identify you and help locate you. Your handwriting, the type of paper you use to mail an anonymous letter, your saliva on the stamp that you send to President DeSantis saying, how dare they arrest your friend, right? All of this can and will be used, and they will be even more robust in keeping track of details that they already do, right? We already live in a surveillance state. The Department of Homeland Security, even now, is doing unconstitutional, illegal things in the name of keeping people safe and free. And once there is a MAGA regime in place, right, there will be literally no restraint on the power of the state. The only people who will have any degree of protection, are the ultra-rich. And in their case, that's only if they're sufficiently pure. Now, all of these things are what I would call Oppression 101, right? China leverages technology. Russia has an intricate and terrifying security apparatus with multiple layers that all spy on themselves. What is going to make the MAGA regime unique is the fanaticism, right? There are cults of personality in China and cults of personality in Russia, but they don't hold a candle to the level of dissociation and 1984 changing of the past from one day to another that MAGA does. And when the regime takes over, there is going to be, aside from a direct and real threat from paramilitaries, and I'll get to that in a second, there's also going to be a situation where people will be expected to be loyal in everything they say and everything they do to the regime. And conspiracy theories will run rampant. Yes, there are conspiracy theories in Russia and China, but they won't hold a candle to the MAGA regime. All of the Republican Party, including DeSantis and Trump, although there's degrees and degrees, embrace conspiracy theories, embrace Q. All of them believe that the Democrats are pedophiles. All of them believe that the Democratic leaders are human traffickers. All of them believe that the Democrats are basically literally agents of Satan. And even the ones that don't believe it will keep their mouth shut in the interest of maintaining power and parity with the party. The only Republicans that will not stay silent and cooperate in every way, shape, or form with this conspiracy of the weak or conspiracy of the minute is going to be the ones that are already speaking out and are already the primary targets of the MAGA regime. I'm talking about the Liz Cheneys of the world. You know, if they're out actively against Trump and people that they call a rhino right now, which, by the way, will definitely also be one of the first targets of the regime, then they will not in any way, shape, or form speak up, right? You look at the Herschel Walker situation where the woman literally has the receipts of the abortion that he paid for, and the Republicans say, so what? They don't care. It's all about controlling and maintaining power. That is the only value the Republican Party has at this point. And when you look at how that's going to manifest in how they act and how they control things, it means that there will be, in my opinion, outsourcing of purity, and that there will be decentralized methods of finding people and reporting them to the authorities for real or imagined crimes, and that the authorities will gleefully respond in many cases, right? What I mean by that is that non-governmental organizations already exist tracking liberals, tracking minorities, and creating lists. Again, I'm not making this up. They're already doing this right now. And they will do it even more during a regime. So you're going to have, just like the Stasi in East Germany, your neighbors, your family members, your friends will have both a societal pressure to report you, but in certain cases, monetary rewards for reporting people that have the wrong books or have the wrong art. Now, the Republicans will go out of their way to make you think that the Democrats will want to do the same thing. But we have to remember that basically almost at this point, everything that the Republicans project and say that the Democrats do is something that they want to do themselves, right? If the Republicans accuse other people of being pedophiles, you should believe that person might be a pedophile. If the Republicans accuse the Democrats of being human traffickers or rapists, you should look at that Republican for either being somebody that thinks rape is a good idea or is actually a rapist themselves. Because that is what they do. They project. They project, just like the Nazis did. So, in a world where you could be a target at random for any particular conspiracy, no, seriously, I want you to understand this, because this is why I'm doing this podcast episode, right? This isn't just about hiding, right? This isn't just about legally changing your name. If you are stuck in the hell house that is going to be the United States of America under a MAGA regime, you need to understand that no one is safe. I'm talking about reign of terror and the French Revolution level of chaos. The who is guilty, who is loyal, and who is acceptable can change overnight. If some crazy conspiracist says that people who have heterochromatic eyes, one color eye on the left and one color eye on the right, are demons, then that could at any point be picked up by the media apparatus, and suddenly every heterochromatic person could be an enemy of the state. If you rent the wrong kind of book, if you order the wrong kind of movie, right? They could go after you for something that you did 10 years ago, right? Think about the anti-communist activity of the House Un-American Activities Committee and the witch hunts that went on during the 50s. You have to understand that the John Birch Society and the Family Research Council have been on an apology tour for the House Un-American Activities Committee and the anti-communist witch hunts of the 1950s for decades. They think witch hunts are a good idea. They think A Handmaid's Tale is a good idea. So if you understand the anti-communist hysteria that occurred during the 1950s, then you have to understand that just like in the 1950s, if you attended a Communist Party meeting in the 1930s, thinking that you were supporting unions, suddenly you're going to get blacklisted and prevented from working and be an enemy of the state for something that you right now think is perfectly safe and perfectly innocent. So basically, bottom line, you have to understand that you could be a target at any time for anything. There is no rule of law. This is rule of terror and rule of purity. And what constitutes purity can change from day one to day two on a dime. So what are some things that you can do to hide, right? So the first thing you have to understand is, while MAGA plays lip service to being open to LGBT, well, not T, but LGB, or open to all faiths, all open to all minorities. There are black people who are famous for MAGA, right, and are famous MAGA supporters. Even though they pay lip service to this, if you look at who they're trying to suppress the vote for, or who they're trying to make scapegoats for, you have to understand that that's not going to be the case, right? And even members of MAGA who are members of these target groups will only be safe until the regime takes over. Once the regime takes over, people like Condoleezza Rice, who are ardent Republicans and who think that they are safe, will not be safe, right? None of these people are safe. Frankly, no one is safe. Even Trump himself is not sufficiently Trump-like to be completely immune from being turned on by his own people. No one is safe. And so when you live in a regime where no one is safe, the only safe way to hide is in plain sight. You need to dance the way they want you to dance. You need to say what they need you to say. You need to avoid ever being pulled over by the police. You need to avoid ever renting a movie or buying anything that is going to make you a target. That is the only way to hide. And you have to understand that you will not have privacy in your own home. They will use your computers, they will use your televisions and your phones to passively listen to you. East Germany had bugs in all public spaces and in many homes. Your neighbors will not be safe. Your family will not be safe. You will not be safe. The only way to successfully hide is to basically live the life of a faithful regime member at all times 24/7. The other thing you have to bear in mind is that they are going to be actively looking for people to persecute, prosecute, and lock up. There's reasons for that. But basically, they have created an infrastructure that makes outrage and victimhood part of who they are. So even after they've locked up and or / killed every trans person or every Democrat politician, they're going to go after somebody else. There will always be another. Whether it's somebody from foreign countries, whether it's somebody from the Libertarian Party or the Green Party, there will always be a target for the MAGA regime. So the way you have to hide is to constantly tap in to their movement and do everything in your power not to appear on the radar of both governmental and non-governmental entities. Now, I talked about what the federal government can do, so let's talk a little bit about more realistic scenarios with the police and the paramilitaries. While the federal government has vast and essentially unlimited resources, police departments do not, nor will the paramilitary organizations. So just because you can't trust anyone who you haven't already had a deep and lasting commitment with, and even then, you might not be able to trust them, you can have a viable option if you are basically someone who can fit in an acceptable category and try and ride this out, right? So in other words, if you change your name, if you can change your appearance, what you wear, what you drive, what you say, you might be able to write it out depending on the length of time the reign of terror goes on, right? This could last a year. This could last 10 years. This could last a century. Once a coup takes place and this regime gets in power, there is no set limit for how long you're going to have to hide through it. More importantly, experience teaches us that once the regime takes place, your movements will be restricted, right? So if you're going to run, do it before you can't. If you must hide, you need to hide well and never break character unless you absolutely have no choice. Social media is going to be used against you. So I, for one, am going to probably be deleting my social media the day that the Republicans have the election called for them. Now, what I mean by that is that there's a lot of different ways to power. The most likely way at this point is Moore versus Harper is passed. The red state legislatures send their own delegates. I would probably wait until the head of the Supreme Court, which may or may not be Roberts, swears in the Republican nominee, which may or may not be DeSantis. And that's at that point, I'm going to be deleting my social media because the situation is fluid, right? This could happen in 2024. It could happen in 2025. It could happen in 2029. We don't know when the coup attempt is going to happen. We don't know that the coup attempt is going to be successful. But at this point, probability says that it's definitely going to happen and that it probably will happen. So I'm not saying don't have a Twitter account. I'm not saying don't have a Facebook account. I am saying that if you wait too long, deleting it may no longer be possible. Right now, if you delete your Facebook account, probability says that Facebook is actually going to delete it. If you delete your Facebook account the day after the election where it looks like a Republican or a Democrat has won, but, the red states are saying that they're going to send separate delegates anyway, and it's, a court case, and it depends on whether or not Biden's going to, pay attention to the court, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If it's a gray area, that's probably the time to delete your account because at that point, Facebook might actually delete your account. Whereas if you wait until DeSantis is already president, at that point, there may be a secret executive memo saying, do not allow Democrats to delete their social media profile because we'll be using it in their trial. You think I'm making this up. You think it's hyperbole, but it's not. And anybody at this point who's not MAGA, all they have to do is just read the news, right? The very fact that the Supreme Court is even willing to consider Moore versus Harper at this point should tell you that they are definitely going to find in favor of the states. And even if they don't, we know that the Republicans find what Trump did in terms of trying to steal the election acceptable. Almost all of them. To a man, to a woman. So hiding is going to be difficult, but possible.
Welcome to the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast.